Welcome back, rookies, to part 2 of our video series where we're showing you our journey into buying land in the desert to put a tiny/small prefabricated home on it and what we're learning along the way about that process. If you're just joining us and haven't seen part 1 of this video series, go ahead and click on the link in the description below. To recap, we purchased 10 acres of land in the desert area of Yucca Valley, California as an investment for my fiance and I. The plan is to provide couples, professionals, and families with the responsible experience of God's beautiful nature and peace using the small home as a short-term rental. If this is something you find really exciting as well, go ahead and click on that like button to support me in bringing you more content like this. In this video, we'll show you footage from our initial trip to the desert and provide you with 5 tips of what to look for when purchasing rural vacant land to build on. First stop on our trip is a town called Pioneertown, which starts us with tip number 1. I realize this may not be news to many of you, but if available, start looking for land near a tourist attraction. Especially if you plan on creating a short-term rental, I would suggest being near a national park, a well-visited beach town, or a ski mountain. This way you know there will be varying levels of guaranteed tourism throughout the year to keep your occupancy rates high. Ideally, you'd want to be anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes and not really longer than an hour from your main tourist attraction or entrance to the park in the case here with Joshua Tree. Pioneertown is a great example of this, being 25 minutes from the north entrance of Joshua Tree National Park. Now, what's cool about Pioneertown as opposed to the other areas closer to the park is it has its own bit of charm. It's a very quaint little town with a popular restaurant and music venue called Poppy and Harriet's. Poppy and Harriet's is at the beginning of Old Main Street, which is filled with protected Western sets from old movies such as Winning of the West with Gene Autry and Buffalo Bill Jr.
Buffalo Bill Jr. Buffalo Bill Jr.
All of these awesome qualities of Pioneertown have made it highly popular and now more expensive for land and homes. Not only is it fairly close to the park, but it also has its own set of things to do in the area for anyone looking to stay at a vacation rental there. We will get into why that matters so much a little bit later in this video. In the following footage, we're driving through a neighborhood in Pioneertown and getting a look at a short-term rental with a water tank on the property. Which leads us to tip number 2. Water access. In the desert, there are several ways to access water. One way is to be connected to city water, similar to how we get water in suburban and urban areas. When looking at land, one of the first things to look for is access to city water. Now, your realtor should know this, otherwise you're going to want to look for this marker on the land. Having said that, even if you see this marker, you more than likely need to have your local water company install a water meter to gain access. The cost to install this could be anywhere from $3,500 to $15,000 depending on your area, so be sure to include this as an additional expense. Now, if the land is not connected to city water and you don't see any of those markers on the property, the cost to bring in city water could get as high as $100,000. Not to fret though, because we do have other options. One of those options is using a water tank or tower, as you see here, with a water holding tank. Big water trucks come around to deliver and fill up those holding tanks when needed. These water delivery services generally have a minimum to fill up your tank at 2,000 gallons each time. So you'd want to get at least a 2,500 gallon tank, which will cost between $1,000 to $2,000. And you can set this delivery up to be reoccurring. This will lead you to have to monitor your water supply and schedule deliveries accordingly when running low. This is not really ideal for short-term rentals because not only would every guest need to be conscious of their water usage, but it would also make it difficult to not have to hire a management company if you're not living locally. But that's not to say that many don't manage this successfully when their only option is to use a water holding tank, as you can see with this short-term rental property here. You may notice I have a different shirt on. It's still gray, but it's different. It has a V. That's because this is taking more than a couple of days to record this video and I had to do laundry. With that being said, let's get back to it. The other option is installing a water well. Installing a well system can range anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000, but it will provide consistent water with less management than a water tank. Having said that, it's probably smart to have a backup water tank in case the well stops producing or supplying any water for any number of reasons. One advantage of a well system is you won't have a monthly bill as you do when you use city water, but you would need to keep up with periodic inspections of the well to ensure no contamination. However, due to increased popularity in areas like Pioneertown, it has been said that the community and the city are doing their best to curb more development. One of the ways they may do this is by putting a limit on the amount of approvals for new wells to be dug in the area. If the land you're looking at does not have access to city water, be sure that a well can be installed. And if so, be sure that there are no current regulations on the amount of wells allowed in this area. As is the case here, possibly with Pioneertown. After our agent let us know about some of these limitations in Pioneertown, she then drove us up more north to an area called Landers. On our drive, she explained some of the things in the desert that makes one parcel of land more valuable or desirable than another. Let's listen in.
So if you're looking at 2 pieces of land, that are identical in multiple ways. If one only has one Joshua tree on it, another one has a ton, like that will matter to people if you're trying to do a rental. That's what prime real estate is out here.
Landers is a bit less developed and has a lot more available land at better prices. Most of the attention was on areas south of Landers and closer to Joshua Tree National Park, but she believed that Landers was the next spot for people to start looking, and we would be getting ahead of all of this. Which leads us to tip number 3. Location, location, location. Look for your land outside of popular areas where prices are rising and there's more attention on regulation. Get ahead of the curve and anticipate where people will be looking next. It helps to have a good real estate agent who knows this and will lead you in that direction as well. If an area like Landers is a little bit further from the main tourist attractions such as a national park, make sure there are local things to do near the land. It can be anything from local coffee to trade shops, monuments, hiking trails. Your guests may not need to go to the main park every day. And especially now with the advent of remote work and workcation, they may just want to stay local at the property to disconnect. However, they don't want to feel so disconnected and in the middle of nowhere that they can't get to a local store or restaurant within 5 to 10 minutes. Tip number 4, utility and power. It is important to find the location of the nearest utility pole when you're looking at land. If you do not see a pole at least 100 to 200 meters away from where you plan to build, then the power company might need to bring in a pole for you. And guess who pays for that? Yep, you do. Bringing in a pole could cost as much as $30,000. Now I know many of you are thinking I'll just be using solar power. And in California, you are now required to include solar in any new construction of a single family home. But the fact of the matter is we still can't fully rely on solar alone, especially if you plan on doing a short-term rental. Don't get me wrong, you could do it, but ultimately it will cost you more time and it could put you in a sticky situation if it falters and you have renters in there at the time. For instance, I know a friend with a short-term rental who is all solar and is now in the process of trying to get hooked up to power because of the headaches he encounters by not having both options. Tip number 5, views. While this is not necessarily essential, it certainly helps to have expansive views if you're planning to Airbnb. And having views that look out across the desert will give your guests that feeling of tranquility that they're looking for. And not to sound too cliche, but it'll get you those Instagrammable shots. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed some of the footage and tips from this video. If so, please subscribe and come on back. But also, please comment below for any critiques or helpful insight you might have. See you soon! Which leads us to tip number 2, water aspects. Which leads us to tip number 2, water aspects. Which leads us to tip number 2, water aspects. I can't say it.